I do want to thank you guys for coming tonight on behalf of our founders, David Gritz and Tony Boo. We're grateful to have you here and have your support. Tonight's a new concept for us. We've never really done something like this before, but we're thrilled to have a great turnout, and hopefully you guys all had a chance to enjoy the art and will continue to do that. I do want to quickly introduce our artists. We have Stacy Robbins Johnson, who's here. And we also have Jason Gross. Irene Gang here is representing her mother, Joanne. And George Woods, who many of you know, he has several pieces displayed as well. Unfortunately, George got called out of town and is not here, but he does send his regards. We especially want to thank the organizations that came together tonight to help this happen. We have our friends at Swiss Re, Guy Carpenter, and Manchester Story, and a huge thank you to the folks here at Denton's for hosting us. So I would like to ask Over to come up here and share a little bit from Denton's on our behalf.
Hi. Hi. Thank you for coming. It's very exciting to see such a turnout, a full house, a very diverse audience in this beautiful New York afternoon. We are very happy to have you here at our office. My name is Omer. I'm a managing associate here at Denton's. I work for VTG, our tech group, and all of you believe in innovation, and we believe in innovation. So it's very exciting to meet you all here. You can think about, all of you think about how to innovate in insurance, while insurance is seen as a very traditional concept, and you know how much you can innovate in it. We try to do the same in the law business. For those who don't know, Denton's is actually the largest law firm in the world, with over 12,000 lawyers all over the world. Where in any global market you can think of, from Australia to the US, South America, Asia, India, China, wherever, we are there. Obviously here in New York, and we can help any of you that are thinking about getting counsel from the very early stage all the way through IPO. That's what we do. We love working with new companies, with very early stage companies, but also with very mature companies at any stage of their life. Again, as I mentioned, I am part of our group. It's the tech group. We think of ourselves as the cool kids, and we have our own. We actually don't work here. This is the traditional office. We have the cooler office that you know very well. It's true. Our office is the meatpacking office. Looks like a startup, not like here, but we don't have such a beautiful room, so we couldn't have you there. But if any of you is in the Chelsea meatpacking area, you're very welcome to come there, and we'll be very, very happy to help you with any of your legal needs. I won't take much of your time, but if you have any legal concern, issues, questions that you want to run by us, we really can offer you the whole package, from a startup package of just creating the company to everything you need, from labor law to fintech. We are very strong in the fintech and financial regulation and so on and so forth. I won't bore you because you didn't come to hear me, but anyway, we're very happy to have you. Thank you for coming. I'm sure it will be a lovely evening, and again, if you have any legal concern or issues, just shoot us a note. Thank you.
So I don't know about you guys, but on the back door of my office, I have these 3 hooks. And on these hooks is, I don't even know how many lanyards. Anybody else know? Okay. So you're welcome to keep your lanyard tonight if you want to have it as a souvenir of this great occasion. But if you would like to return it and recycle it, we will have a bin outside as you're leaving. You can drop it in and leave it, and we'll recycle and reuse again, and hopefully reduce waste a little bit. We go to the next slide. Now, as we shared with you, and hopefully you saw in your email, that tonight's event, all the proceeds are going to support 2 diversity-focused nonprofits. The first one, the Female Founders FinTech Foundation. I don't know how many times I had to practice saying that. The Female Founders FinTech Foundation leverages public and private partnerships to create parity for female founders in FinTech. And we have Streetwise Partners, and they advance economic equity by connecting underrepresented talent to for mentorship and career opportunities. They support over 500 individuals every single year in New York and Washington, D.C. And both of these organizations, they're worthy of our attention tonight, but I hope that each of you can also help continue their support and mission through your own actions of inclusion in our industry. I would like to share a little bit more about InsurTech New York and what we do to enhance the InsurTech community and ecosystem. We bring together startups, carriers, and brokers in a variety of ways, along with solution providers. And we have our annual spring conference every March, which you can get on the wait list now for that if you go to our website, just so you know. We also have multiple education networking programs like this throughout the year. We also have invitation-only executive roundtables, as you can see. My wife decided to text me right in the middle of So we also have an executive roundtable tomorrow morning on customer engagement. Should be some of you, I believe, are also coming to that. And we also have 3 programs that are designed for startups. We have our annual early stage competition that coincides with the spring conference. And just last week, we opened applications for our 2 accelerator programs. Our Growth Stage Accelerator helps startups looking to partner with leading carriers and brokers by providing them mentorship, education, and introduction to industry players who can support their organization objectives. And the MGA Lab works with startups who are looking to become MGAs. The lab program condenses the time it takes for startups to develop their MGA product and gain capacity and distribution. And we're excited this year we'll welcome our 2nd cohort this fall, and again, applications are open for both of those right now. If any of you know of any startups, or if you are a startup who may be interested in one of these programs, please reach out to us. I will be sending out an email to you with more information about these programs as well after tonight's event. Speaking of tonight, we've got a pretty simple schedule. You can see we're going to be having a talk here in a few minutes, and then we'll have a panel, and then we'll continue with some more networking after this, and give you a chance to experience the art more and talk with the artists and enjoy that. So with that, I'm going to ask my friend Jason Gross to come up here and take it over. Jason is Vice President and Head of Platform Administration. Yeah, you get the full introduction here, Jason. You're special. And as you can see, also, the other part of his bio is that he's a very talented artist, as you guys have seen tonight. So, Jason, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Thanks, Aaron. Well, happy Thursday, everyone. You know, I was just thinking that last year I think I did 24 or 25 talks at conferences and events in 11 states and 2 countries, all on innovation and InsurTech and adoption. But it occurred to me, as much public speaking as I've done over the years, I've actually never talked about my art practice. So this is a rather unique experience for me, and I'm really excited to take the next few minutes to share a little bit about what I'm calling Zen and the Art of Insurance, an inquiry into innovation. But before that, we're going to come back to the panel here. Do I not have the right deck up? Is there another deck? I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about why we are here today.
The other one.
Now, there's a third deck.
Yeah. That's nice.
Oh, that one right there. So that first picture that you'll have here in a second, that's really why we're here today. This picture was taken outside of my art studio in Des Moines, Iowa, April of last year. So that's me on the right, George Woods, who is the phenomenal artist with Swiss 3 on the back wall. Of course, David and Tony from InsurTech New York. My friend Matt Johnson, who is founder of Layer out of London, really amazing technology with printable ink to develop basically anything that you can print on can become an IoT sensor. So water detection, bed bugs, you name it, at low cost. And Rob Galbraith, author of The End of Insurance as We Know It. So this was after the Global Insurance Symposium, and got a group together and we went to lunch. And after lunch, I'm like, hey, my art studio is right next door. Would you guys like to see what I've been up to? And we had a wonderful conversation. And at that time, right outside my door, it was like, this is something special about the industry. One of the things that I love about the insurance industry, and maybe you do too, is it's about relationships. Yeah, there's a lot about, the actuary and the pricing and underwriting and everything else. But probably what we appreciate most about it is the connections that we have made with others in this, crazy industry that none of us ever thought about being in when we were young, but here we are. So in many ways, the story actually goes back to the fall of 2017. I was out at Plug and Play in Silicon Valley, and a mutual connection of George and I said, hey, you two should talk. Because you both like paint or something. And George and I have become very close friends ever since. We even collaborated on a couple art projects, and I'm really heartbroken that he couldn't be here tonight, but his art also speaks incredible volumes for very talented artist and leader that he is as well, so make sure you see George's work in the back. And so, but we thought about, hey, if there's George and I, there's got to be other insurance leaders who also appreciate, creating, whether it's painting, sculpting, music, whatever it is. We should really do some type of event. Maybe we'll do an art show at some point, about these crazy insurance leaders who are also artists. And that's where the idea was born. And we chose this week. Credit to InsurTech New York, credit to InsurTech Insights and their conference this week. Maybe you were part of that. We thought, what better time than during InsurTech Week in New York to have an opportunity to share some of our work. But also thank you to our sponsors, Guy Carpenter, Swiss Re, and Dentons for hosting us. Because we didn't want to just have an art show. We wanted to have some meeting as well. I'm really looking forward to a panel discussion here in a little bit with Randall, Risha, and David. But before that, here's the inspiration for my little talk today. Maybe some of you back in college, or maybe since then, read Robert Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, or even going way back to the late 40s, the classic Zen and the Art of Archery. And the reason I chose this is because of that question. What does Zen or what does art have to do with insurance? So while I've been in the insurance industry for over 20 years, I'm often the first to admit I've never been an actuary, I've never been an underwriter, I've never sold, serviced, or managed a product. I've always been in kind of IT and operations, but most of my career has been in corporate strategy and in innovation. And I actually think the fact that I've never been an actuary, an underwriter, a claims person, whatever, has made me a better strategist. Because I have never been, I don't want to say burdened, but never boxed into, this is how you do things. I've worked on pretty much every line of business, every channel of distribution, but I've also brought a fresh perspective because as anyone in the innovation knows, the words that we all like to hate the most are, well, that's not how we do it, or that's not how we've always done it. And so my innovation practice, my strategy practice, I actually think has been very much intertwined with my own artistic practice. And I'm going to take a little bit to share kind of how I think those two have been tied in together for me. Any Ted Lasso fans out there? Yeah. I just threw this slide in at the last minute the other day because I'm so all emotional about the last episode. But Danny Rojas is my favorite character. In many ways, Danny Rojas also kind of embodies the Zen. To always find that positive. And he goes, football is life! But in our industry, we not only believe that, we also know that life is risk. Let's face it, everything that we do as individuals, everything that we do in business and commerce has risk, right? Now, most of that risk we just accept, or we think that we're covered under an umbrella, an auto home, whatever else. And probably most of us in this room understand that insurance is more than just an auto policy and a home policy or, a liability policy for a small business. We know that it's a very broad and vast industry. But anytime there is risk, if you can measure it, then you can try to mitigate against it or even build a hedge against it. And so much of what I think has been happening in the InsurTech space and the innovation in this industry is taking a fresh look at, we have new ways to measure and to think about risk than we have ever been able to do before. And so I kind of thought I'd share, because I want to make this a little practical about the industry, 4 lessons from my own practice. Not only thinking about Zen, and for Zen, it's clearing the mind. Whenever I create my art, it's really about letting go, clearing the mind, and finding that mindlessness. One of my favorite quotes is, for artists and practitioners, it's about being childlike. Because to a child, everything is possible. But to the expert, everything is limited. Because the more we know about something, the more we define it in the box that we understand it. So a lot of my own practice has been about setting that aside. Maybe here's a quick example. Have you ever really just struggled with a problem? Trying to find an answer. Maybe it's sitting in a screen in a spreadsheet or a crossword, whatever it is, and you're forcing yourself to try to find the answer. And then you walk away or you get called away or something else. And you come back 10 minutes later, half hour later, a day later, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, duh, there's the answer. Because so oftentimes we get in our own head and we get boxed in. And so much of the practice and the creative practice, the innovation practice, is about getting out. And so the first thing is understanding what got us here won't get us there. That's an old trope. But in thinking about innovation in carriers, for brokers, whatever else, the first thing that we have to understand is that the world has changed. And innovative practice, like a creative practice, is getting outside of our own minds. So I absolutely believe in creating time, space, and a culture for creativity. I'll give a quick example. As a former head of innovation for a carrier, I desired to create an innovation lab because I saw all these other carriers creating these, where's the Denton's guy, the cool spaces, for creativity and everything. I'm like, I want one of those. I want a garage. I want a lab. But my carrier would never, do that. It was way beyond. But I came up with this idea. I'm like, just because I can't afford, I don't have a budget to do a full-time innovation lab, doesn't mean that we shouldn't be spending time devoting resources into looking at the insurance problems, the distribution problems, the policyholder problems creatively. So I came up with the idea of doing a pop-up lab. Literally, I had that idea while having a beer and then painting. Because let's face it, there are different types of thinking. If anyone follows me on LinkedIn, I do a hashtag Thinking Thursday. I devote time every week to thinking. But that's a different type of thinking. So many times our best ideas come to us when we're in the shower, in the car, walking the dog, whatever it is, because we've cleared our minds of all the challenges and problems that we're trying to solve for. And that actually opens us up to thinking about new things. So it's really important to create that time and space so that you can get to that beginner's mind and really frame things. Because when we think about innovation, I want to absolutely stress as a practitioner that innovation isn't just about technology. So this pop-up innovation labs, so the first one we did, this is back in 2017, was on virtual reality and augmented reality applications in insurance. And it was mind-blowing that our little Midwestern conservative mutual insurance company would be thinking about such things. And some might say that's just innovation theater or innovation for innovation's sake. And while I do absolutely believe that innovation has to solve real problems, I also believe that you can't get to that until you learn, you don't know what you don't know, until you open yourself up to inspiration. So we did a lab on virtual reality. We did a lab on IoT. I literally had underwriters and claims people taking Raspberry Pis, little circuit boards you can buy for $10, and creating their own circuits. But we also did a pop-up lab on the workplace of the future. We also did probably my favorite pop-up lab on diversity, equity, and inclusion. because innovation isn't just about technology. It's not just about solving the problems for our partners or for our policyholders. That's all very important, but it's also about culture. It's also about engagement. So I'm actually going to share something. I haven't told this story very often, but I'm going to give an example from one of my works of art. And I didn't bring it with me because these 5 pieces combined are 10 foot by 4 foot, and it wouldn't fit in my suitcase. But that pop-up innovation lab on diversity, equity, and inclusion explored several topics, such things as identity and pronouns. We did artificial intelligence tests to detect implicit biases. And it was very eye-opening for all of our participants in the lab to really think about what is identity, how do we think about ourselves, and how do we interact with others in our community. And so it was really inspired by that I gave myself a challenge. So while most of my work is all abstract, you'll see that I often incorporate words, I incorporate multimedia. I have great admiration for artists who can paint and draw things that look like things, or people or landscapes. I think this work in the back is absolutely amazing. That's not me, that's not my talent. And I don't think I would have that same sense of zen, that mindlessness, if I was trying to recreate something, because maybe I might be a little compulsive or perfectionist, like, oh, I don't have a hair right or something. I love the abstract process because for me it really opens up the creativity. So I often start my work with a word or a phrase of positivity, of affirmation. In fact, most of the works on this great wall started with a word or a phrase, maybe even written very likely in pencil or chalk and then completely painted over. The 2 works on the very end back there have positive quotes that I've used fabric tape, like athletic tape, over top. Because what is tape? It protects, it mends, it bonds, and so it's kind of sealing and protecting that in. That whole series started with this. I gave myself the seed of what does identity mean to me? And so I ended up creating these 5 works over about 6-7 months. They're really not intended to be displayed so tightly together, but if I wanted to get them all in one photo, I hung them up together. But left to right, it's he, him, his, she, her, hers, they, them, Q, which can be questioning or queer, and then free. And I actually displayed this work for the first time last June. Of course, it's Pride Month. And so each one, I really tried to get into the mindset of what is identity. So you'll see a lot of stereotypical, so like the colors, the blues, the reds, the rounded shape, the feminine form. Each one has words, has ink, has acrylic, has tape. So while you can't see it in this photo, but I'm happy to show you, each one also incorporates fabric tape and different means and mechanisms to kind of imbue that. A lot of my works instead contains words, so the she, her, hers, the second one there with the red and the round. I kind of get into a stream of consciousness, that flow, that Zen mind. I actually wrote a poem of affirmation to my wife and 2 daughters. I had no idea what it says. I didn't try to capture it as I was writing it. And so it's there in abstract. It's not intended to be read or interpreted by anyone else, but it's there and it's part of the work and it's imbued through that. The middle piece, the they, them, theirs symbology, like the triangle, the box that so many people feel like they're either in or forced to try to be in. The Q, I used that tape and I twisted it, almost like a helix of a DNA. And actually on the tape, which you can't see, there's words of affirmation in Morse code. So here again, putting the words in there, but in an abstract, not so obvious way. The whole time I was painting that 4th piece, the Beatles' Blackbird was, in my mind. It wasn't even playing on the radio. It was just, Blackbird singing in the dead of night, take these broken wings and learn to fly. I didn't want to just borrow the Beatles' words though, so it's actually written in abstract in reverse, so bottom to top, which inverted means all my life learning to fly with broken wings, taken then in the dead of night, Blackbird. I was so overcome with emotion and trying to put myself in a position who are queer or questioning, that an almost just a sense of not so much rage, but just energy that I needed to get out. I literally took a palette knife that was on my easel and I stabbed the painting 13 times. And it wasn't meant to be in rage, it was just to get the release out. I mean, have you ever felt that feeling where you just have to get something out? So there's also 13 holes in that canvas now from that, but it's very much a part of the work. The final piece in the series, here again, thinking differently, thinking about, is a work I called Free. So the tape, the black lines, kind of evoke maybe a jail cell or jail bars. And here's the thing about a cell and bars. They can either keep you in or keep the bad things out. Part of the inspiration with this, President Obama, once upon a time visited Nelson Mandela's, one of the many prison cells that he was held in South Africa. And of course, all the photographers following the president, all kind of shuffled in, to see him looking out the window. But his photographer actually went outside and took a famous photograph of President Obama looking through that same window that Nelson Mandela had. And so when I look at this, you can either, the question is, which side of the bars are you on? And so maybe, in being free, you're actually on the other side of the bars, and the bars are now protecting you from all that anger, angst, and things that are now, locked away, and you're outside looking back in. And then finally, I always like to do a little twist to tie something like this together. And so the final touch is I used a fluorescent paint marker. You can't even see it obviously during the day, and most of the time it's displayed, but if you happen to turn off the lights, you'll see kind of that hidden message, just that reminder that love is love is love. So in closing, a creative practice, whatever it is, whether it's music, whether it's sketching, whether it's painting, I think is very important to that creative process. And for that creative process is also an innovation process. And it doesn't have to be a final destination. You don't have to think about the final work. Because as Persig wrote in his book, sometimes it's a little better to travel than to arrive. And so that for me is Zen in the Art of Insurance, an inquiry into innovation. Appreciate you all listening. And with that, since this is still an insurance event, we also wanted to talk a little bit about business. And so here again, thanks to our sponsors, Guy Carpenter, Swiss Re, and Devons for hosting us. And I didn't really introduce myself with Manchester Story. My day job is a venture capitalist investing in early stage companies, an artist by night. But I'm really thrilled to have Randall, Risha, and David join me for a panel discussion about the future of distribution. So please join me.
All right, so give me 1 minute while I, these, you want to turn your
Microphones on. So, this is not part of the script. So I'm going to start off with a curveball because you would kind of expect that from me, right? How do you find your creative expression? Is it art? Is it music? Is it, athletics? Where do you find your time and inspiration? And this is really just me stalling while I'm pulling up the questions.
Mute your mic if you're not talking.
I'll take the first one, Jason. So, not everyone knows this story, but now you will. So for the first 3 years of our business, I had pushed really hard with Tony to do some fun events where we can actually go out in the environment in nature. And I mean, obviously, we're sitting here in a law firm in New York City, which is not that. But in a few weeks, June 20th will actually be the 4th event of the series, which I know Jason has been to one of these. It's called InsurTech Trails. And the simple idea behind it is that if you go out in nature, you have a very different perspective than when you're taxed and tied into society and all of its constraints. So to answer Jason's question simply, I get my inspiration by being out in nature, and I do like the active side of it, so whether it's hiking, biking, snowboarding, surfing, the combination of those two, I think, maximizes my creativity.
Thank you, David, for humoring me. Risha.
My answer is pretty easy. It's dance. Fun fact for, I think nearly everyone in this room that probably doesn't know, I used to be in a hip hop dance group.
What? I know you for how long?
And it was
I'm
so
just
long
not
ago
hearing
that
this.
there are videos. Well, maybe
So,
it's on
who
YouTube.
wants to see hip hop in the art of insurance?
That's the next segment. That's the next segment. We won't be doing that today. But you know, growing up with immigrant parents and the rest of it, being in theatre, being on stage, they entertained it, but it could never be a career path. So like the dream job was always to be, you know, a dance model or West End. And so for me now, if you know, I'm out in a class, taking a class, I definitely have that moment of zen or just taking away from whatever's been happening in my life when I'm doing that.
I often get lost in like cooking things.
Yeah.
Is my
That's an art.
Yeah. So I will get lost in making, like, for example, ramen. And we're not talking instant ramen. We're talking ramen that takes you 48 hours to do a broth, and I will do that for 6 months straight. And my wife will be tired of the smell of the ramen. She's not eating it herself. She just hates the smell. And then it'll be day 182, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. Or I'll do the same thing with pizza. I have a really good job with pizza. I have a really good job with like sourdough bread. And I'll get on these kicks, and then I feel like I've done enough, and then I'm on to the next one. And then also my wife cooks on the day-to-day because she comes home and is like, oh, what are we gonna have for dinner? And I'm like, oh, there's nothing in the fridge. I can't make anything. And then she makes an entire meal for us. So like, she's much better of a cook than I am, but I get lost in cooking.
And do I understand she's here with us today?
Whoa, that's aggressive. She's not here today. She's here today.
So let's get down to business. We decided to do this panel around the art of distribution to not only talk about innovation in the distribution space, but ultimately also want to get to the question around those who are underserved by current insurance products and markets and distribution. Well, let's kind of start off where we are today. And, you know, Risha, with your experience working with so many InsurTechs through Guy Carpenter, you know, what are you seeing in the MGA space, or what are maybe some examples where you see there are some unique approaches or opportunities?
No, I can definitely answer that. Letting me in nice and easy with that one. So maybe it might be helpful to just define what I think stands out as unique and niche and different. And there is a danger with InsurTech of always jumping at the shiniest, newest object.
You get bonus points if you incorporate a hip hop reference. Just saying.
Regretting telling you my little secret, right? But I guess for me, unique, anything that jumps out, really stands out from the plethora of InsurTechs and MGAs that we're seeing today is really, yes, it has to be economically viable product, but it also needs to be solving a real problem. It needs to be targeting a coverage gap in the marketplace. It needs to be looking at a segment that is underserved, that hasn't had enough attention, the solutions haven't been discovered yet. And I think that's what makes it unique. In terms of what we're seeing, what stands out, a great example is a startup MGA we're working with now, which offers traditional commercial policies for small businesses. But what they've done is they're targeting a specific subsegment within small businesses. So agents and brokers traditionally have almost ignored. The margins are too small. It's just not economical for them to target that. And they're targeting that very small segment, but they get the volume. And at the moment, they're only been operating for maybe a year, 16 months. They're already on track to, I think, double their premium year on year, and they have a backlog of over 8,000 agents waiting to work with them and use the platform. And so that's a great example of something that jumped out to me as unique and different, because they're targeting a segment very niche, but they're also using technology to better serve agents and brokers, and that was a great example. And another one that I was talking to a colleague about today, completely on the other end of the spectrum, was actually a startup that came through Lloyd's Lab, and our counterparts in London have been working very closely with them. And the problem they've been targeting, and it really came, the idea was born out of the personal experience of a founder. is that a hip song? Is that IQ? And the problem they've been tackling is really around the cost and uncertainty of IVF treatments. And so what the team have done, working with all the partners in the lab, is they've created a predictive model that helps essentially calculate the chances of success on IVF treatment, and can also indicate how many cycles you might need to hit that level of success. And to me, I was frankly mind-blown. So I think that's phenomenal. It's not a problem you really think about until you actually go through the process yourself. And to answer the question, like, that's what I find inspiring. It's seeing these brand new products, these brand new solutions, things that people haven't thought about but genuinely need attention because there is a difference there.
You know, I think that's why we've seen so much activity in the MGA space. Some of these niche challenges are not things that a lot of traditional insurers are going to go after. But by providing, capacity and the underwriting paper for it, it's a way for them to bring new business onto their books without doing the work. But it also enables the creativity and entrepreneurs to bring new solutions to market. And Randall, I know, today you're a vice president of strategic partners at Swiss Re, but you weren't always that. You have some background in the startup space as well. So I'm going to give you the option, either from your current seat or your prior seat, or maybe a blend of both. What are you seeing in this space?
I'm going to go from prior seat. Prior seat was a reference towards kind of the MGA I co-founded that was focused on non-standard auto in the U.S. for Hispanic buyers, primarily who were Spanish-speaking first. So we wanted first generation, second generation immigrants into the U.S. whose first language was Spanish. And kind of to that end of the problems we see and kind of how I arrived there was, before that I was in a kind of regional carrier, and I was noticing that predominantly Hispanic communities, based off of census data, was performing better, more profitable, right? And I wanted to change all of our marketing in our state to focus on this. Start doing it in Spanish, start hiring more Spanish, start doing branding in Spanish. Around that same time frame, I met my co-founder, who had his own personal experience as the person who did not have insurance experience, but he served as the de facto insurance agent for all of his family that was moving in from Latam into the US on how do we get insurance. And he was flabbergasted on what it took for them to get it, right? And so we decided to partner together because I knew how to build this product, I knew it was profitable, I knew how to do it, and he had this idea that we could work through it together. And so the idea of problem solving underserved community as it relates to the art of distribution, it was meeting these people where they are, right? Really understanding your customer because you are in the community, or you are an ally of the community, or you are deeply invested in the community. For example, we did things that were things that Spanish speakers would know natively, right? So in case you're unaware, the term seguros is how you say Spanish, how you say insurance in Spanish. However, aseguranza is also how you say the words insurance in Spanish, and that's more widely used in Latin America. You don't necessarily know this. If you go and you look at Geico, you go and look at these websites, they use kind of Google Translate to translate their words into Spanish, and it's often you're gonna see seguros, 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 whereas if you go on Google AdWords, you're gonna get more traction off of aseguranza. So these are the kind of things that we knew, that we understood intuitively, that we applied, and that we used. And these are the kind of things, when you know your customer, when they're underserved in this community, that you can really go in and deeply affect.
Thank you, Randall. You all don't know how much I've been looking forward to this next piece. So last time I was in New York was during the InsurTech New York Spring Conference, and the tables were turned. David was moderating a panel that I was on, and David saved all the really hard questions for me. So turnabout's fair play. But I'm going to let you off easy, at least to start with. David, Aaron, during the introduction of InsurTech New York, talked about all the amazing programs that you all do, including the newer program around NGAs. So I'm going to give you a softball to start off. What are some of maybe the coolest out-of-the-box things that you've been seeing in that NGA space?
Sure.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jason, and I'm sure you'll have some more opportunities for some tougher ones as it goes along. But we've seen some really interesting MGAs in the space, and maybe I'll share a couple that were in our program and maybe give credit to the people that showed up as well. So in this room, Wesley is here, and their company is called Sola. And it solves a very simple problem, which is when you have a tornado hit your house in the Midwest, which I think Jason is familiar with, maybe some policyholders that have been through that. It takes a long time to get the money from the insurance carrier to make all of the changes and fixes. So they took a parametric approach, which is essentially an automatic payout that's determined by the wind speed in a specific area. So it really helps people that may not have enough money to fund the deductible or to make the immediate fixes they need, and will also help the insurer afterwards to ultimately support the recovery. So I would say that's definitely an interesting market that we've seen. We also hear about MGAs that don't necessarily participate in the lab, but go after and try and address other markets. So recently we heard about an MGA called Mammoth Life. And for those of you who are in the life insurance space, you know that most of the time life insurance is a luxury good, as in it's created ultimately for everyone, but it's mainly sold to people that can afford the highest policy face values. And for the longest time, it's been kind of equal, but over the last 10 years or so, there's been a decreasing amount of life insurance sold to lower class and middle class. So Mammoth Life is really focused on how do we sell lower face value policies by being more efficient and targeting communities that can really benefit from it by working with different community associations that serve those areas. So those are two examples, one PNC, one Life, one here, one that we heard of.
Thank you, David. I think that's a great segue into, let's go a little deeper into the fact that we have underserved markets. Now there are so many causes and so many ways that certain segments of our population have either fallen through the cracks or are unbanked or haven't had access or language barriers. I mean, there's so many different aspects. I'll even share a quick story. I was talking to a carrier recently. They sell small face value life insurance policies primarily for end of life, and they do it in neighborhoods and communities where they are largely unbanked. To this day, they still go out and they collect their premiums monthly, door to door, typically in cash. And at first, my response, my action was, what? How can you afford to do that? But when you think about it, if they are unbanked, then that means they are completely outside of the system. And how else could they without that personal touch and that reminder? And it often then is a relationship that forms too. And they can become advisors. So what I first thought was very archaic, like what is this, 1978, we're still doing punch cards and, the program. But it speaks to the diversity and the challenges that we have, and those of us in the industry have a chance to help. Because at times, what we do can be exclusionary. So Randall, I'm going to kick it back to you, because especially with your experience doing a startup in the MGA, we all know that the cost of going into a new market and developing a new product can be very expensive. Especially when there is little to no data, because that's how we make our decisions. We are loss runs and loss histories and everything else to be able to predict what are the actuarial odds that an event is going to happen. So what do you think from your seat? What's kind of the minimum either amount of premium, data, what do you want to answer it from here in Swiss Re or kind of in the general terms? What do you think about that barrier today?
Yeah, so that's a great question. In terms of it being hard, yes, it's incredibly hard. As you're going into this, a lot of times they're underserved, traditionally from a perspective of the established carrier or the established partner for a reason, right? So you're going into an upwards battle on something like going into serving a small business, going into serving a minority majority group. That is absolutely the case. And when it comes to, for us at Swiss Re, I will tell you that the minimum could be $5,000 of premium a month, insofar as it's a profitable line of business and you can prove it, right? So it's really challenging the idea of what is a minimum. There isn't really a minimum for us. We want to find partnerships. We want to be able to use our ESG, which is our sustainability and our growth endeavors, by going into underserved communities. And then if I may, I would love to take a quick derailment to talk about the idea of it being hard and to be challenging, and what do you do in that. So I want to take an opportunity to talk about something outside of insurance, which might be the sweater that I'm wearing. A lot of people are probably like, man, this guy's really underdressed. So this is an example from Moore's Brewery. And what they noticed, and I talked to the guys, I talked to the founders a few times, what they noticed was that there was less than 1% of brewery makers, distributors, I'm sorry, I'm not sure the term there, that were African American or Black. And so what they wanted to do was kind of tap into that market as it was growing. And they started going into this idea of identity-based marketing, which is something that was already formed years ago by Tom. I forget Tom's last name, but he was at Marlboro. He's the person who turned a white cowboy Marlboro man into a black dude who's wearing a leather jacket, right? He was the first one who kind of looked into this, which makes complete sense, right? Moore's Brewing doesn't make their own beer. It's done by another small brewery that's not even in Chicago. It's in Gary, Indiana, also a fantastic beer. And what they did was they took, sorry. So what they did was they took this sweater, this guy in the sweater was a Dutch painting done in 1665, I believe it was. They took him, they threw gold chains around his neck, they threw a ring on his finger, they put a crown on his head. So when they first launched, this was the label they did. They made more from their merchandise sales than they did from beer sales off of something like that. This was already in public domain. They took some creativity and started adding something to it, and now it's a fly sweatshirt. I wear this on all the flights, I wear this all the time, I get compliments all the time. They took something and they really branded it towards the identity of the group that they were trying to serve, and they understood what was cool to them, as opposed to just doing like a random PBR, very generic. They made something that really identified to their group, and they used kind of their creativity to pull it off at little to no cost. So creativity is really the answer there.
I love it. Great segue into the art of distribution. That's perfect. Thanks, Randall. Risha, over to you. So maybe if you could give some examples from your seat of some of the challenges and opportunities, especially with those new products and those hard to serve markets.
Yeah. Challenges are plentiful. I can generally talk about that for a long time. But I can definitely tell you about kind of what we see, what's coming, what's hitting our desk, what's coming through. You know, we don't really turn anything away, but there's definitely a process that we have to go through with some of the MJs and startups that we see and that we vet, and that we have a process of due diligence. And so the way that we see it is, you know, we need to de-risk our investment as well in terms of the amount of resource, energy, time that we spend on startups. You know, not everyone is going to be a unicorn, not everyone is going to succeed. You know, we know how many startups fail. And so for us, it's really about working with the startup. So it's never going to be, this is my concept, this is my idea. Yeah, no, thanks, no thanks. It's always going to be a process with a startup. And there are so many that we do speak to and work with, we have a whole practice around it. And for us, you know, the challenges are sometimes InsurTech struggle to communicate or illustrate exactly what the value proposition is, exactly how it's unique, how it's different, or even just, you know, showing us what the unit economics are. These are things that we help them work through, we give them guidance. And there are so many barriers to entry in our market, specifically within insurance, within reinsurance, and I think that's a great challenge, especially, you know, an example is all the commercial auto MGAs, we're seeing influx of them. And there are some really early stage, really green, and we're speaking to them, we're saying, you know, have you thought about the time it takes for filing? Have you thought about who the incumbents are? How are you going to compete with them? Have you thought about, does the state even allow you to use real-time driving data in your pricing? All these things that, we'll get back to you, and then it becomes a process, it becomes an iteration. And so challenges exist, but if we can work with them, generally that alignment makes sense. And something that someone told me once was that VCs, I think it was VCs invest in lines, not dots. And so your question kind of, it made me think of that, because it, you know, we can't make a decision based on one piece of information. It has to be multiple pieces of information, lots of dots. Once you connect those dots and create some alignment, we can help startups, however they're struggling or however challenging it might seem for them, to grow into a more strategic partnership.
Thank you, Risha. David, let's face it, while we're a heavily regulated industry, we still have too many areas where there are built-in exclusionary aspects to what we do and how we go about doing it. We can even just maybe scratch the surface about, if bias is found in artificial intelligence and what's the I to police the AI. From InsurTech New York, you're seeing so many different startups. What are you seeing in that space, and what areas do you think we should be keening into?
Sure. So, first we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room on the kind of exclusionary side, but ultimately we are in the business of choosing the most profitable risk areas, right? So we want to know what's working and ultimately what's not working. So in terms of how we have to think about that is like looking at the different rating variables that we otherwise may not look at. So for example, we had Loop speak at our spring conference a couple months ago, and their whole theory is that credit score by definition is exclusionary, and yes, it is based off of actuarial science predictive of people's driving, but it also is predictive of a lot of other things that should not be tied to driving records. And because of that, we're essentially changing the way that we look at risk to the way that it should be correlated, but not necessarily true causation. So I think Loop is an example, but I think if you look more broadly at rating variables, there's a lot of rating variables that are used by insurance companies that frankly in other contexts are not legal. So if you take the example of a landlord, right? A landlord cannot discriminate on sex, but an insurance company that's selling life insurance because they have these historical life tables is able to do so. So I think it's a really important thing to ask, especially, you go back to Jason's paintings where, sex and gender identity are things that are not necessarily everyone sees them as binary. We have to ask ourselves, is that a legitimate way that insurance carriers should be able to discriminate? And what startups are going to do something to address that? And I guess to give one example, since you asked about startups, there was one that I met with earlier today. They're a GIA startup called Imbibe, and essentially they're looking at how can we determine your true age, and how they explain it is if you're on a desert island, you have no passport, you have no identifiers of yourself, of where you were born, how do you know how old you are? And the founders studied things like DNA methylation and other ways to understand that. So when we're thinking about that, that's a good example of how we can look at someone's age differently than the date they were born.
Well, on all those cheery notes, let's close on a little more positive side, because we are about out of time. So I'm going to do a little bit more of a round robin, real quick answers here. More on the innovation side to these challenges. So I'm going to ask everyone the same question. From your vantage point, what are the innovative things we can or should or are seeing to help solve the problems of those who are underserved by current and traditional insurance products and distribution means? Randall, Risha, David, you'll have the last word.
The two things I'm really excited about is parametric. Talked about Wesley and Soul. I've talked to Wesley before, and I think that it's really interesting. I think the thing to overcome there is how much of a financial model it is, and how much it protects financial assets. It's very similar to hedging on a financial risk, and I think it's a little bit challenging for consumer, but if you can get over that hump, I think it has a ton of applicability for hard to reach, maybe because of hazards that we can't provide traditional homeowners insurance to, and do something into that way. The other thing that I really like is unstructured data. Being able to pull information from so many different resources that we had never done before, and there's a lot of AI companies that are working on that I think is really interesting insights into small businesses. And that way my colleague Grant is over there giving me an evil eye. And we talk about this idea a lot of unstructured data. So yeah, those are the two things I was excited about.
I'm really glad you didn't say the things I had in my head. I think Jason, you mentioned earlier, innovation isn't just technology, but there definitely is an aspect of technology that we have to acknowledge. And I think the best example I can think of is really like embedded insurance, and the fact that there are so many new ways now, more efficient ways, less costly ways of accessing different people. And we know in many countries that are considered underserved markets, they have a phone, they have mobile, but they don't have a car, or they don't have a house. There's other ways of accessing different markets. And I think technology has to be definitely acknowledged at this point. And I think the second thing, a little bit out there, is probably culture. You know, without the right culture, whether it's within an organization, whether it's within a startup, whether it's just within a consulting, it doesn't matter where it is. If you don't have the mindset and the open-mindedness for innovation, it's not going to happen. You will be stuck in the traditional way. And it works in some cases, but we know for the most part everything is evolving and we need to evolve with it. And so those would be my 2 things.
So we are here at an InsurTech event, and Jason, you mentioned that, you know, your focus has been tech. So how can we use tech to enable us to ultimately go after microinsurance opportunities where traditional agent broker channel is not efficient at this kind of small scale, but it's efficient at volume. So brokers can still make money. I know there's many of you here, but you can take advantage of the technologies. And one example is someone here, Kyle from Indem, they were in our accelerator, and they basically have built a tool that is a chatbot that uses generative AI to allow people to have conversations in order to buy insurance. So you can imagine that you can get all the way to the end of the process, and then the broker signs off on it, and you can close that business. So they can sell all kinds of very low face value policies that people can interact with the chatbot to get pretty far in the process.
Randall, Risha, David, thank you very much for sharing your perspectives and your insights with us this evening. It's been a pleasure to have the conversation. So we say a big thank you to our panel tonight. Aaron, back to you.
All right, thank you, Jason.